Blonde bombshell Jayne Mansfield lived a fast-paced life. She flitted between jobs, between lovers, and was catapulted to fame for her stunning looks. But she was often likened to Marilyn Monroe, seemingly following in her footsteps and being described as a carbon copy of the star. But when Marilyn's life came to an abrupt end, Jayne hoped that she wouldn't follow a similar fate. Their lives weren't that similar, were they? Jayne Mansfield, born as Vera Jane Palmer in Pennsylvania, was an iconic actress and popular figure of the 1950s and early 1960s. Known for her glamorous style and public persona, she became a notable presence in Hollywood during this era. She gained fame not only for her roles in film, but also for being the first major American actress to appear nude in a mainstream Hollywood film. This groundbreaking moment occurred in the 1963 movie Promises, Promises, where she appeared in several nude scenes. Mansfield's appearance was significant as it marked a turning point in Hollywood's depiction of nudity, setting a new precedent for mainstream cinema. After studying dramatics at the University of Texas, she held several jobs, from selling popcorn at the movie theater to teaching dance and working as a part-time model. Her career began to take off when she appeared in Hugh Hefner's Playboy magazine. But she was more than the Playboy Playmate of the Month. Although she was portrayed as a so-called dumb blonde, she was very intelligent and was able to speak different languages. She enjoyed a number of movie roles with varying success and performed on stage, at nightclubs, and in television series. Her personal life was often in the spotlight with her romantic relationships scrutinized. She married 3 times and had 5 children. During her career, Jayne was often compared to Marilyn Monroe, another famous actress from the same period. These comparisons irritated Marilyn, but some claimed that Jayne actively sought them to increase her own fame. There were even more rumors that Jayne tried to form a relationship with President John F. Kennedy, hoping to annoy Marilyn, as John and Marilyn were rumored to have had an affair. After Marilyn's sudden passing, Jayne became concerned about her own fate and is reported to have said, "Maybe I'm next." On June 28, 1967, Jayne had just finished performing at Gus Stevens Seafood Restaurant and Buccaneer Lounge, otherwise known as Gus Stevens Supper Club. She had a 2-week stint there. The club was renowned for hosting famous performers and drew in crowds from far and wide to its Seaview location in Biloxi, Mississippi. But Jayne had another engagement to get to the very next day. She was due to appear on the midday show on WDSU-TV Channel 6. For this, she had to make her way to the studio in New Orleans. So after the supper club, Jayne and her agent Sam Brody climbed into a 1966 Electra Buick 225. The driver was 19-year-old Ronnie Harrison. He was a college student who was earning some extra cash working for Jim Roberts, also known as Russ, a club promoter and manager at Gus Stevens Supper Club, and was tasked with taking the star and her agent to Louisiana. As it was in the middle of the night, Jayne lifted her sleepy kids into the back seat along with her 4 chihuahuas. Her 3 children who were with her at the time were 8-year-old Miklos, 6-year-old Zoltan, and 3-year-old Mariska. All 3 of them had drifted back off to sleep as the car pulled out of the parking lot and onto the beach road. Skirting around the Gulf of Mexico, headed westwards, they joined Route 90 and crossed over the St. Louis Bay Bridge. Just past the Mississippi-Louisiana state line, they paused for a short break. They walked into the White Kitchen. Even in the middle of the night, Jayne turned heads and was instantly recognizable by those inside the fast food chain. She bought 3 bottles of Coca-Cola and some candy before complimenting another woman on her incredible hairstyle, not too dissimilar from her own. With the children still asleep in the back of the car, Jayne, Sam, and Ronnie continued on their way, all 3 of them sitting in the front of the vehicle. They sped along Route 90, reaching speeds of up to 80 miles per hour. Just after 2 o'clock on the morning of June 29th, the road was clear, but they were about to enter a treacherous section. In fact, one particular corner, not far from where they were, was nicknamed Dead Man's Curve. Over the years, this stretch of road had been responsible for numerous accidents and crashes. As the tarmac twists and winds through the swamplands, people take advantage of the few straights available. At high speed, they overtake slower-moving vehicles, unaware of the hidden dips and corners in the road. But there was something else on the road that night, which made the notorious stretch even more dangerous. A fine fog had settled over the swamp, laying a thin layer across the road, illuminated by the headlights. As the light reflected off the fog, visibility worsened, and the fog became denser, blinding them. Despite the deteriorating conditions, Ronnie did not slow down. He drove straight toward disaster. Unbeknown to him, there was an 8-wheeled truck in front of him, just around Dead Man's Curve. He couldn't see it yet, but the truck, a Johnson Motor Freight Lines tractor trailer, had slowed from 50 miles per hour to 30 miles per hour when it saw a mosquito fogger flashing a red light just up ahead. Before DDT was banned, these foggers would drive along releasing clouds of chemicals to diminish the mosquito populations in the area. Kids would run after the trucks, ending up being covered in a cloud of toxic chemicals, but they were effective and were used throughout the Louisiana swamps. Today, the same method is used, but with less toxic chemicals. The clouds of pesticide released by the truck, combined with the nighttime mist, created a dense fog. The slow-moving 18-wheelers sitting just behind it was almost invisible in the poor visibility. Jayne was now just 23 miles from downtown New Orleans. In just half an hour, she would be at her destination and could move her children into a bed for the rest of the night. But it was not meant to be. As Ronnie rounded the curve, he suddenly came face to face with the back of the 8-wheeler. He was traveling at such speed that he didn't have time to stop. At 2:25 that morning, the Electra Buick smashed straight into the back of the tractor trailer with such force that the roof of the car was sheared off. The bonnet slid underneath the back of the truck and the front of the car was crumpled. When emergency services and news reporters arrived at the scene, they were greeted by what they described as utter carnage. For one young reporter, Bob Walker, the images of what he saw that day have stayed with him over the decades. He was so shocked by the destruction at the scene that he left within a matter of minutes. Ronnie and Sam were found in their seats, having suffered fatal injuries from the impact. Initial reports suggested a more shocking scenario involving Jayne, but this was not accurate. What was thought to be her head was actually her wig, which had been dislodged during the accident. Jayne sustained severe injuries that led to her death, with her facial expression reflecting the tragedy of the incident. Miraculously, her 3 children and the 3 of her small dogs had survived the tragic ordeal. Her 2 sons received only minor injuries, and her daughter, actress Mariska Hargitay, who was the youngest of the 3, was left with a zigzag scar on the side of her face. It was believed that sleeping in the back seats had saved their lives. The official cause of her passing was severe head trauma. Since the accident, manufacturers of tractor trailers have installed a heavy metal bar at the back of their trailers to prevent cars from sliding underneath it should they crash from behind. This bar has become known as the Mansfield Bar. Following the shocking tragedy, Jayne's body was flown to New York, where a private ceremony took place on July 3rd in Penn Argyl, Pennsylvania. She was buried in Fairview Cemetery, also in Penn Argyl next to her father. 4 years later in 1971, a 16-day trial looked into the actions of the drivers on the road that fateful morning. The trial found that Ronnie Harrison, the driver of Jayne's car, was negligent, but the driver of the 8-wheeled tractor trailer Rambo was not responsible, nor was the driver of the mosquito fogger. In a grim turn of events, the crashed car was bought by a private collector and put on display by the side of the road in Florida. It was then moved to the dearly departed Tours and Artifact Museum in Hollywood, Los Angeles, where it was on display to the public until the COVID pandemic, when it was put into storage. Jayne received numerous awards during her lifetime for her acting. Her youngest daughter, Marishka, who was only 3 at the time of the accident and fast asleep in the car, followed in her mother's footsteps. She took up acting and received her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. It was placed next to her mother's almost 50 years later.